Hello and welcome back to another Duel Links episode. Today I would like to go over my anti-trap build. The primary goal of this is to equip your monsters here, whether it's Wild Heart or the Sheen, because they are unaffected by trap effects. So this has been popular in the meta just because it's pretty simple and easy, especially with some equip cards. So let's just break it down and go through here. So Skullmeister is in here just because his effect allows you to discard this card when an opponent activates an effect in the graveyard. You can send the card from your hand to the graveyard to negate the effect. So that is really handy in, playing against these dinosaurs, the dinos, the dirty dinos as people like to call them. Pretty much, well, anything that has an effect that activates in the graveyard. DUEL is another one. This card can really help prevent them from getting their combinations off. So it can really buy you some time in actually getting your Wild Heart or your Sheen to actually up to the appropriate cost to where you can start doing damage and win the duel. Wild Heart here, let's just go in here and show you. This is from the Dark Dimension Tower. So if you do not have this card, any replacement, basically if you have like the Debunk trap card here is another one that you can be used. When a monster effect is activated in the hand or graveyard, that specifically targets monster effects, though. It's not spell or traps, that also. Whereas this one is just a card effect is activated in the graveyard. So you can see there's pros and cons to each. But basically just have something that you can either negate the attack, Sphere Karibo. You can negate the attack with the monster card. That is a UR though. So, I mean, just try and look for something along those lines because that's the primary purpose there. Wild Heart is a dual reward from Jade and Yuki. Pretty easy, especially with it being a rare. Sheen is a card from the card trader. Pretty simple, pretty easy to get a hold of. Now the equip cards, you can pretty much use any equip cards that you want. The ones that I'm using are good in the simple fact that, it takes 1,000, it gains 1,000 attack. Axe of Despair is another good one because it also increases, by 1,000 attack. I have 2 mage powers because the more spell and trap cards you have, the more attack and defense it gives you. I also have the Power of the Guardians. This is actually a very powerful N card, normal rarity. I have a feeling this card will be nerfed soon, just on the simple fact of how powerful it is. So, and it's popping up everywhere. You can pretty much throw this into any deck and make it even stronger. So I do feel that this card will be limited in the near future. Keep that in mind, but for now, you might as well take advantage of it. Traps, I'm using Canadia just because it is a good card to be using. As before I showed you, Debunk because there's a lot of those cards that are monster effects that are activating from the graveyard like Ubel, so I'm trying to prevent that from happening. Debunk is a card that you can be using. This one is gained from the card trader, so that's a nice one to have. Canadia is gained out of Valiant Souls. It is a UR. The Power of Guardian is out of the new Dimensional Wizards. Mage Power is out of the Visions of Ice mini box, so you will have to reset if you want duplicates of those. And then Bashing Shield is out of the Empires of Scarlet mini box. Again, you'll have to reset if you want multiples of those. I'm also running a Treacherous Trap Hole, even though I'm not a big fan of this card, just on the simple fact of the power that it has. And even if they just set one monster, you can target your monsters with the effect, and your monster will not be destroyed because it is unaffected by traps. It doesn't mean they can't be targeted, but they are unaffected. And then there's the Wall of Disruption. So your trap cards here, you can pretty much use whatever you have. You don't have to be limited to this. You can throw in Mirror Wall. You can throw in, pretty much whatever you guys have accumulated. Needle Ceiling is a good one, but that requires 4 monsters. So keep that in mind. Drowning Mirror Force, but that's when they're attacking directly. So just keep that in mind when you're using that. Mashizer is not a bad one, but that's when a monster is sent from the field to the graveyard. So like if you get attacked, if he gets destroyed, then you can, destroy one of their monsters. So just keep that in mind, but pretty much will use what you guys have collected. And by all means, it's not anything that's mandatory to keep those. I'm running the skill balance. When they have changed this, you have to have at least 6 of each card type, monster, spell, and trap in your deck, and you are guaranteed to start with 1 monster, 1 spell, and 1 trap in your hand. The 4th card can be any card, but you will be guaranteed 1 monster, 1 spell, 1 trap. So it's a nice skill. I like using balance now because it gives you a wide variety of between spells and traps, and you don't just focus on one or the other. Let's jump in some dual replays here. Show you, well, first I want to show you the win rate in this deck is actually fairly high. If you actually pay attention, you can probably have a better win rate than I. I'm running about a 70% win rate. There's 2 wins out of 3. There's another 3 out of 3. And then there's 2 out of 1. And so there's 10 duels right there with only 3 losses. 7 wins, 3 losses out of 10 duels. That's not bad by any means. So I definitely do strongly recommend this deck because it's fairly inexpensive and fairly easy to make. And you can have a lot of fun with it. So let's jump in some dual replays here, because I will give you some commentary as it goes along, because this deck is a lot of fun to play. And typically when you go up against an opponent that focuses on traps to counter, they pretty much will give up when they figure out what you're running. As you can see here, I didn't have the best opening hand, so I'll just take the life point damage, draw a card, and I draw a Wild Heart. So I attach Mage Power and Power of the Guardians. Power of the Guardians effect allows you to add a spell counter, and that also gives you the power of attack and defense. But more importantly, it gives you protection, because Power of Guardians allows you to remove a spell counter from anywhere on the field to protect your monster. And as you can see, I'm getting pretty beefy there, so he just gave up at that point and swung into me because he knew he was just going to do it. Was just going to get at it. So he gave up. Pretty easy. And typically the only deck lists that I have lost to have been pre-ban list Kokai Miru and the Ancient Gears. If I played the Ancient Gear deck appropriately, I probably could have won, but I was missing my timing because I wasn't paying attention completely. I had my toggle switch turned to auto instead of on, to where using Canadia at the appropriate time would definitely help. But you live and learn, I guess. So you can see here, I was dropping my cards. I play Canadia to flip him into defense mode, even though he still used this Silent Slash. So he's adding a Silent Swordsman to his deck, from his deck to his hand. But Wall of Disruption. You can still see those are good cards to be having. Still wasn't enough. He tried to survive, but it just wasn't enough. So from here, I got one last duel to show, and then I will leave you at that. This deck is a lot of fun, like I said. I definitely strongly recommend trying to get all of these cards. At least, build your version of this, because you can see there's a lot of cards, or a lot of deck lists that are still using traps fairly heavily, to where you can just basically swing through them. See, and you can see he actually targeted my Wild Heart, but it did not work. So Power of the Guardians activates, both of them does. So I'm gaining 1,000 attack and defense, and I have, yep, and he just surrenders. He sees what's going on. He was focused on traps, so therefore you can see this deck can give you a pretty good win rate. You focus on the actual wins and playing, and not take 2 or 3 different steps, you can definitely have a better win rate than I, but 70% is still a lot of fun to be had. So by all means, hit that like, hit that subscribe button for more Duel Links content, and keep on dueling and having fun.